Hey, have you ever given money to a mission and wondered where the heck the money goes?
Our guest this week is Barry Higgins from Uniting World.
Listen to the podcast. It's on ethical mission.
Welcome back to another episode of Filthy Hope. If it's your first time here, we're so glad you found us. On this show, we spend time in the grey spaces where Jesus, life and culture intersect. I'm your host, Pastor Jonty, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rev Ness.
How are you, brother?
I'm good. I'm a little bit hungry.
Yes.
Because
yes.
I'll be smashing some food after this. But
good on you.
We just finished an episode, an interview that we're about to jump over to with Barry Higgins from Uniting World.
What a guy.
Yeah. We'll leave the introductions to when we jump over to the interview in full. But I think this is a really interesting conversation about mission and like ethical mission, because I think mission, and maybe we'll do another episode about this in full on another occasion, but the word mission is a bit of a swear word in some cases, because it does carry a lot of colonial baggage, but like just a lot of negative connotations for some people. But really interesting conversation about what ethical mission can look like, especially overseas mission.
And Barry has had such an interesting life as a ministry agent in the Baptist church, as a reverend for many, many years while he was with the Baptist church, and so many interesting moves, placements we'd call it in the Uniting Church, and he unpacks all of that. And it's very exciting. It's a very uplifting interview. It's a great conversation with loads of energy, and I'm really excited that you might love this one today. I certainly enjoyed having the conversation.
Yeah. All right, without any further ado, we might just jump straight into
Let's do it.
because it's a full-length interview. So we'll see you on the other side. Enjoy. Well, we're joined in studio by a special guest. Welcome to the show, Barry Higgins.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
We're thrilled to have you. For people that might be meeting you for the first time, which I imagine is a lot of our listeners, take us into the day-to-day of Barry. What do you do? And just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, look, the first thing is I love small boats, kayaks out in the ocean. Looking up at a massive cliff's face, it just makes you feel like you're kind of small in this amazing, mysterious world, and grateful to be alive. So that's one of my passions. I'm a saltwater person.
Nice.
Wow.
That's a big thing about me. That's the place that I regenerate, and probably where I feel most connected to the greater good, which we call God. Is in nature. That's where I feel that's where I get renewed.
Where do you kayak, Barry?
Well, a lot of it out on the George River, the Botany Bay, and out off Cronulla.
Wow.
I love going on trips to little islands and camping over. It's a beautiful part of my life. So that's one thing. I'm a dad. I've got two. I'm married to a beautiful woman named Fiona, who has made sure that life has always been interesting. And I've got two boys, one 17 and one 19, and they're great. It's just it's wonderful seeing children, young people growing and just watching and enjoying all of that.
It's a great stage of life you're at the moment.
So it's really beautiful. And I'm somebody, I guess, who for a long time have kind of tried to work out how to, live in an authentic way with my, this kind of Jesus thing, which, this wonderful and sometimes annoying call to, I always see it as to live beyond the white picket fence vision of the world. It's the annoying aspect of it, because, sometimes it'd be nice just to say, well, life's just all about getting a nice white picket fence and acquiring everything and just enjoying it all. But there's this nagging thing out there that says there's more. And the call to, authentically live in relationship with neighbour, close and far, in this sense that there's more than just the white picket fence. Yes, so that's me, and that's always been my struggle. How do I do that well? So it's kind of me in a nutshell.
It's a beautiful story, and I know a little bit more about you. And the interesting thing is you you are a cool clergy person who's no longer a clergy person. So you were a reverend in the Baptist church, served in the Baptist church for a long time, doing incredible mission work within the Baptist faith denomination. And now you're no longer doing that. You're using your gifts and skills as a ministry agent working for Uniting World. I want to go back to the whole Baptist stuff because you've got the best stories about how you started and how you actually got into using the hands and feet of Christ into the world.
Yep.
Can you just, to launch us, tell us a little bit about Uniting World? Because in the Uniting Church, we know that the Uniting World's ours, don't we, Jonty? It's like uniting.
Capital U at the front
It's
of it.
us.
Yeah.
It's like we own that thing. It's ours. But can you tell us and share with us a little bit about how Uniting World, who you are and what you do?
Yep, for sure. I mean, as you say, Uniting World is the international aid and development agency of the Uniting Church, right? So that it exists to, I guess you could say, to try and smash poverty across the world, to bring the liberation of Jesus where everyone has abundant life to everyone. That's what the Uniting World ultimately is about. But the interesting thing about Uniting World is that it doesn't do that by saying we're going to go out and deliver services globally. We actually work through our big denominational partners all across the world. So we're in a large part of the Pacific. That's probably where 50, almost 60% of the work is in the Pacific. And we're in parts of Asia and Africa. I mean, in many parts of the world we are operating. But the way we operate is through our church denominational partners that we have a very deep connection to. And our partnerships are not years of partnership, they're decades and decades of partnership. And I think that's one of the really unique things, because what we do is we believe that the church within each community that we are working has the capacities and the skills and the capabilities to know what is best to bring the love of Jesus to their communities.
Wow. Can you give us an example? When you say the Pacific, are you talking about places like Fiji and Tonga and Samoa?
Yes, Vanuatu as well, Kiribati, Tuvalu.
And who would our partners be? Who are our ministry partners that you talk about there?
Well, for example, it would be within the Solomon Islands, the United Church of the Solomon Islands.
Right.
A lot of times the partners that we have are historically people that we've had linkages of connection to even before we were uniting, maybe when we were Presbyterian Congregational, this is before
or
my
Methodist.
time, Methodists.
Yeah.
So there's this sense in which it's when we as church have maybe worked from that kind of older mission model of where we're going to give the light to people, sort of almost moving that. It was a big paradigm shift, I guess, where it's recognising the light is already there and alive and burning loud and wonderfully within these communities well before us, and now I guess the model is far more about saying how can we listen to and support in solidarity and partnership what these very mature church denominations are telling us is needed. And these are groups that have thick connections into their communities across countries. So they're not just one little organisation over here, they're actually mature denominations that have a sense of deep connection to the community. And one example is in the Pacific, is these are often the first responders, for example, when disaster strikes. So when there was we would have all heard back in 2022 in Tonga when there was the volcanic eruption.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was actually the Methodist Church of Tonga that was one of the first responders on the ground, because they're kind of the civic leaders of the communities.
Right.
So that's how, it's a very strategic way of working.
So in being leaders, they've got it's rooted deeply in their theology and their faith and belief, and yet they're leaders in their complete their country. It's very
Yes.
different to how we do it in Australia, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a very different model. Quite beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, and often even when you talk about transformational change in lives, in a lot of our communities, not all of them, but in a lot, the Christian church is a large segment of the population, sometimes nearly all the population. And so theology, the Jesus story is the heart language through which you bring about real change. It's starting with that story and then mission growing out of that.
Wow. Wow.
that's interesting.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's such a different way of like even I don't know, like I look at something like in Australia in the last 10 years, but especially in the last 4 or 5, the conversation around like faith and Christianity in education is such a like really volatile conversation about. Some people feel like, depending where you're having the conversation, really strongly about
Yep.
you know, Christian schools being a really good thing. On the other side of the fence, faith not really should be in education at all, depending who you talk to. That people feel very strongly, and Christian faith, or just faith in general, or all sorts of religious beliefs, don't really seep into cultural decision making in a lot of Western countries, not just Australia.
Yep.
It's just such a different way of faith and religion just sits very differently in culture, as I am starting to get the image of what it looks like in places like the Pacific, or even like Africa, and I don't know, it just seems very alien. And I'm really interested to talk to you about how that shapes mission, because I'm really interested.
Yep.
You started by talking about your missional partners and how that informs how you go about mission, and how you can do that not only ethically but in a way that's actually most useful to the people in the places that you're
Yes.
doing
Yep.
mission for. Can you speak a little bit about that and how how it's less of a going in and doing on top of, or doing to, and more of a working with the people that are already there?
Yeah, that's a great description, to versus with. I mean, I could just tell the story
Yes.
Please.
of Tanaka, because I sometimes think when we think about mission, let's start with Tanaka from rural Zimbabwe, a schoolgirl whose parents can't afford her to go to school. And then when they eventually can afford for her to go to school, they don't have enough, she doesn't have enough food, enough nutrition to be able to concentrate in class. So she doesn't have the capacity to be able to live out her God-given potential to be all she can be. So I sort of start with her and I think, okay, there she is. And she is part of a community, and she's of people that are having the same experience. And they're having that experience because they're living in rural Zimbabwe where, because, for example, of climate change, these already arid environments are now becoming more and more dry, where it's very hard to find water, and then it's hard to grow things that you need to live in this community. And so into that comes the Methodist Church of Zimbabwe. Now that is already part of that community. So they're hearing how their sisters and brothers are experiencing life. And their story, like our story, is this story about blessed are the poor, for the kingdom of God belongs to you. And if we take that at face value, that means the kingdom of God belongs to Tanaka.
Yeah.
It's her kingdom.
Yep.
And so the question that mission starts with is, how can we truly make the kingdom of God alive for Tanaka? And so our partner begins to have a conversation with that community, because good mission or development, whatever word you want to use, grows out of deeply understanding the contexts of the community.
Which we didn't in years gone by.
Absolutely.
Did we?
Yep.
We just took our white men from England and dumped them into these places without even having the language, thinking we were all doing the right thing, imposing our lens of faith upon these communities, right?
Yes, and it's that kind of absolutely, and I guess it's very opposite, because in a sense the solution begins by listening to these people's life experience.
Yes.
They know what they need,
Yes.
right? And so with that, together the community worked out, well, what we need firstly is a well, but wells are expensive because the type of well that's needed in this kind of arid environment means it has to go metres and metres down into the ground. It needs to be solar powered to pump out properly. So it's an expensive thing. You know, you're looking at probably in Australian dollars, $25,000+ for that kind of a mechanism. And where do you place the well? Place it in the school. The school is like a hub, right, where it's an institution that's going to be around. That means someone's going to look after the well.
Yes.
So you get the ownership of that. I've seen so often, because I've been involved in development, where people dig wells and they're neglected because no one's looking after it. So you have to. It's about building it in collaboration. And then, well, why have a well? Well, the well means, of course, that there's water, not just for the school, but for that surrounding community. And then that means that and this is the beauty of this model, is the young people then learn as part of their school curriculum to grow stuff for food. And what does that mean? That means that then the young people, at least who are students, get at least one nutritious meal a day.
Yep.
Which gives them the capacity to concentrate. We know ourselves here in Australia, we have breakfast programs, right?
Yes.
Why do we have them? We have them because we know that when kids don't get a good meal, they have behavioural problems, they can't concentrate. So that's the beauty of the approach. And then what does that all mean? Well, it means that then Tanika can live to her full potential, she can learn, and then she can actually get hopefully a job that pays quite well, right? And then she can look after her parents when they get old, because we're talking about countries where there isn't a social welfare system like in Australia. So these are the rippling effects of that kind of approach to doing mission. And it's not just that. Because of the values of the Methodist Church, there's also a concern to make sure that those with disabilities get access to this. There's also around this work on child protection and how do we ensure that children are not going to be abused. And so there's all this other work that's been done around this. So to me, that's the mission of Jesus, is it not? I mean, there is, you know, the kingdom of God belonging to this community. That's mission.
Yeah.
And what is our role as uniting in that? Well, our role is not to, in our boardroom in Australia, design that program. How could we come up with something as innovative as that? Our role is to support our institutional partner, that church partner, to do that work and to use all its connections to make it happen in a very cost-effective way. But our role is also to ensure, and this might sound a bit boring to some people, but it's to ensure that there's good accountability processes so that when people give, because our role is to get people from our community who have wealth,
mobilise them,
to get them to give to this. And our role is also to ensure that that money is used in the way that we promised those constituents here that would be used.
I love that.
And our role is also ensure that that there's continuous improvement in the work that's been done over there. So it's about encouraging how do we evaluate this and make sure that we continue to do this in other places really well. So that partner's doing this in 7 different locations. To me, it is one of the most exciting examples of, you know, doing mission, doing development well, is what's happening in that church. And it's an example of unleashing the people who have the intelligent capabilities in the country to do the job, because they're the ones who know how to do it best.
Yeah.
I love that. 25K I've got ringing in my head. When I think of 25K, it's not a huge, insurmountable sum of money to generate. Can you imagine if just the Sydney-based churches clustered into hubs and then had a mission drive to say the churches on the North Shore, Jonty, all got together and said, we want to raise 25K to have a well built in a place in Zimbabwe that can provide water and sustenance to an entire community. 25K. Each little church pocket would only have to come up with a couple of K to make that a thing. That is just extraordinary. I kind of feel like I want to run with that myself and drive that. That's attainable.
It is,
Isn't it?
and the thing that organisations like Uniting World provide people with the opportunity to do is to raise that sort of money, not in a speculative way and not in a way that they're just going to chuck a well somewhere and cross their fingers and hope, but in a way that is, like you say, in partnership with organisations and groups that are actually already going to be doing it and know where to do it. In the case of a well, this is the best place to put a well. This is the best way to maintain it. This is the best way to do it that's actually going to be useful for the people that the well is there for. Otherwise, if you know, a bunch of churches in, like you say, North Shore of Sydney, very affluent, could very easily raise that money. But that link that Uniting World is providing is to actually make that $25,000, to use that random number, useful and actually make a difference in a way that isn't just going to make us feel nice for raising that money, you know?
100%. And I mean, at the moment, Manly Uniting Church, for example, has got a project to raise $30,000 for one of those communities for that very reason, which I'm so excited by and in awe of the work they're doing. So, John, absolutely.
Amazing.
It's really good. What I'd also say, and I don't know if this will be as popular, is that it's also the non-sexy stuff that's needed too. You know, sometimes we like to say, I'm giving to the well, and that's great, and I'm 100% for it. It's like sometimes too we need to give to strengthening institutional leadership that helps the program to continue to go. And sometimes it's the boring auditing processes that need support as well, because these are all part of the project that we have, and because it's the whole thing, but it's actually being smart. And what I love about Uniting World is the fact that we think very strategically and carefully about how to use that money well. And wherever possible too, there's an emphasis on even employing staff overseas rather than Australia, because again, to do Uniting World work, like help us as a funding agency and mission agency on this side to do that well, because it's about, to some extent, trying to, as much as possible, do yourself out of a job.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a beautiful way of looking at it. Yeah, that's incredible. Years ago, I don't know if I've actually shared this story, and we can cut it if we think it's boring, Jonty.
I'm sure it won't be, but
it could be boring.
I said to God, I was working as an actor at the time, and I was a fairly new Christian, and I was a part of I was a Penty. So I'd grown up on prosperity doctrine.
Yeah, which we've talked about recently. Yeah.
And I was saying to God, if I get this KFC commercial, I am going...
Was it actually KFC?
KFC.
That's so
if
funny.
I get this KFC commercial, Lord, I am going to give that money to a kingdom project. I'd never done anything like this before. And I thought it was hilarious, because I didn't actually want to do the KFC commercial, because I knew what I had to do. I would have had to eat in the KFC, and they never let you swallow it, so you've got to spit it in a bucket. I'd done quite a few commercials like that in my day. So anyway, I thought it'd be a gross job. But anyway, if I get this job, Lord, that's what I'm going to do with the money. It was $5,000, the money. I'll never forget it, $5,000. I remember my husband saying, Are you really? Think of what we can do with that money. We could go on another overseas trip. And I said, no, I really feel like God's saying I need to just give this to some project. Anyway, I got the bloody job. Okay, so I got the gig.
Oh, wonderful.
I filmed the gig.
Spat out the KFC.
Had to spit out the KFC, all of that. And the money came in. Well, my uncle at the time was doing some work in Asia as a missionary. And he said to me, Ness, just reached out to me. I had a very successful business. And he said to me, Ness, we're looking at financial partners to partner not in a well, but in a mill. And we need, guess how much money? $5,000 for a mill. And what the mill will do will help them process the grain, not just for that community, but for other communities, and to be able to on-sell, and very much like the well missional focus. And my Uncle John and Auntie Laura were a part of this, and I said, this is where my money needs to go. And so, wrote them a check. They went off and did the stuff, which was just incredible. it was so interesting that years later, Uncle John stayed in touch with that place. And that little community's thriving. It's thriving because of that mill stuff. And I didn't even know what a mill was in those days. I didn't even know what you did with grain, or I was so dumb, I had no clue. But it has had a profound impact on the community.
Yeah.
And I just think I couldn't go over there and do the mill behaviour. I don't know anything about a bloody mill. But what I could do was I could write a cheque.
Yeah.
I could listen to God, and I could be obedient to what God was telling me to do, and I could write a cheque. And I think if anyone's listening and you feel like this is something that stirs in your heart about how God might be using you and your funds to be the hands and feet of Christ in another part of the world outside of your beautiful middle class life, then maybe a missional approach and uniting world might be the thing for you. That sounded like a really dodgy sales pitch, but it comes from a place in my heart that I feel quite deeply about. I don't often talk about that mill thing because I actually forgot about it. But it is profound. My Uncle John recently died last year, and he died. And at the funeral, I had no idea the impact that actually had on their life. That they got up and spoke about it, how God used a KFC commercial. And people pissed themselves laughing, thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
How God used a KFC commercial to do some great missional work in Asia. So I think God can use us in
Absolutely.
in outrageous ways. We just need to think outside the box, don't we? Yeah.
Yeah. That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, I just thought that was a bit of a segue from my own personal experience, because I think you said it's not sexy to help with the governance and the aid agency component. You're right, it probably isn't. And building a well and building a mill and buying a cow or, that kind of thing, that's a real tangible thing that us bougie people over here, we can sort of plug into, can't we? And you talked a little bit about it earlier off camera, Barry, about that hero thing, about needing to be kind of the heroes. And I think probably for me in my early Christian walk, God was teaching me a lot about my own self at that stage. I was new to the whole Jesus language thing and learning to be obedient. And that was one of my big first obedient things, to listen. And I think God was testing and watching me in my own growth journey, many, many years ago. But you talked about that hero thing. Can you unpack that a little bit? Is that appropriate too?
I mean, we all like to be heroes, let's be honest, and including myself. It's almost like feeling like we want to have meaning. We want to feel like our lives are having impact. So I think I'm not knocking that, because I think that can be a good thing. I think the danger of the other side of it is that sometimes with that we can forget the people that we're actually seeking to be heroic with. And we've got to sort of understand, what's going to be most useful for them. So we need to, it's not bad that we have those feelings, but we've got to step back and say, hang on, how can I, though, be most useful to others? So, for example, sometimes, and I'm not saying these things are necessarily wrong, but sometimes we might say, I'm going to go over and I'm going to build 10 houses for this community over here because they need houses. And what we forget is, what does that do to the local builder who needs to feed their family, who actually are taking the work away from them? And maybe, in fact, it'd be cheaper to pay them the cost of you going over there to do that sort of thing. Now, I'm not saying it's not black and white. These things have got lots of shades of grey, and I don't want to be disrespectful in saying all that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it's just an example of being thoughtful about how we do things. And I think sometimes the most heroic thing that we can do in supporting wider communities is, I would say, we can be cheerleaders with deep pockets.
I love that.
And I mean, I don't just mean in a superficial way. I think we can connect like I find it interesting working with Uniting World. One of the most privileged things in doing it is this sense, even though I haven't met a lot of the people, I've never met Tanika, right? But I feel a connection to
I
her,
feel connected to her now.
you know?
Yeah.
And you can build this sense of solidarity with people even when you haven't met them, and then we can give generously because our partners already have the expertise to do things. They are. You know, that's one thing. Well, I lived in Cambodia for a long time, and one thing I learned was there's a hell of a lot of Cambodians who are a heck of a lot smarter than me.
Yes.
And guess what? They're a lot better at working in Cambodia than I am. That's a shock.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Yeah, crazy.
I mean, who would have thought? You know, this guy stumbling around his baby Khmer language and a dance in the culture. Who would have thought that he wouldn't be as effective as the people in that community? It's a shock, isn't it?
Can you share with us your story about you and Fiona going to Cambodia in your early Baptist mission days? Can you share about that and some of the stories? It's quite an extraordinary story. Like Fiona was an occupational therapist. You're a reverend and you land yourselves for, is it Baptist Mission Aid?
It was called Baptist Mission Australia. Back then it was called Global Interaction, but they now call it Baptist Mission Australia.
From my Baptist days.
Your Baptist days. Look, Fiona had... she always had a dream to work overseas. That's part of what drove her to do international, to work in as an occupational therapist. She was very passionate about wanting to make a difference to ensure that people with disabilities were included in communities. And I was a bit of okay, if that's something you want to do, I'll give it a crack, wondering what I could do as a Baptist minister who had some kind of, who'd also worked as a mediator and conflict resolution sort of work here. And I sort of thought, it's a bit of a leap. But when we went to, with what's now called Baptist Mission Australia, we were very upfront with the fact that we weren't wanting to go there to be the kind of, church like preaching type thing. We wanted to go alongside the community and strengthen what they were doing, which supported how a lot of they wanted to do it as well. So we found, hey, we do have a resonation with this. And I was just very lucky, really, that I fell into a time where the largest umbrella organisation, which is called the Evangelical Fellowship of Cambodia, saw that one of the problems was that there was all sorts of conflicts. As the country started to develop after so many years of civil war from the 1970s under the Pol Pot regime right through the 90s, right into pretty well the 2000s, the country was had pockets of conflict and civil war. And so you can imagine that meant that as people were empowered to actually have to make decisions for themselves, the problem is how do you do that well? And also families learning to get on together. How do people learn to listen to one another? So that's what they wanted training in. So that's what I was invited to come in and do. And you just realise how Western a lot of it's a very interesting area because you realise you come in and you think, okay, I know how to do some of these things, but it's very much a Western lens and you've got to learn to share your ideas but let the Cambodian people work out how that translates into their cultural context.
Beautiful.
And I was very lucky to have an amazing young leader, Chan Moni, who still is leading the organisation. It was developed through this called Peace Bridges. And he was a guy who was very troubled because he'd grown up with all that war and you can imagine what that did to families. Oh. And he ended up getting involved in youth gangs and you could go to the market, for example, and you could buy rocket launchers at the market or guns. And so I don't know how he was lucky enough to survive this time of crazy unrest in himself. But he found... He found this faith, this whole Jesus thing connected to him in a deep way, and he has become a beautiful man of peace over there who he's such a bright guy. I mean, he rings around me. He's just really smart and he's an amazing communicator and thankfully he had really good English. So my role almost became, not exclusively, but to a large extent, really nurturing and mentoring and supporting him and also getting money in which could be used to drive it, developing the organisational structure with him. But very much at the end, it was about getting out of the way and letting him run the show. And that was interesting too, because what I found was the extent to which you got out of the way was the extent to which you were asked to come and give advice.
Interesting.
It's often if you stick your nose out, it's learning. It's interesting because when you work in this sort of stuff, you've got to realise there's different stages, and you've got to be willing to work out what's the most strategic thing to do now. And sometimes you help with something, then you need to get out of the way. But that was a very real privilege, and I was just very lucky to be in the right place at the right time, and also to just work with some amazing expatriates and also some incredibly talented Cambodian people, and that's an organisation now I strongly support.
Isn't it amazing how God, hearing that story, it's such a beautiful story of how God has weaved and knew all along, this is how my theology goes, Barry, that God knew all along that Fiona was being equipped and trained in a way that could be used for a time like that. And the combination of your mentoring skills and mediation, peace building skills yourself, that you come together and do this incredible missional thing. It's really miraculous, isn't it, how God can weave those really random skill sets together and bring about a flourishing ministry that's still going today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a gift.
Yeah.
That's seeing the fruit, aren't you, even to today? It's amazing. Barry, will you tell us a bit about, you shared again off camera about your very early days as a young reverend in the Baptist church in the streets of Sydney, and you were a part of the Hope Street Ministry, and I remember in my Baptist days that was a bit like the wayside kind of ministry for the Baptist church. Correct me if I've completely got that wrong, but I remember thinking that was so edgy, because I remember hearing about prostitutes coming in and having their makeup done, and they would be able to come into the Hope Street and play piano.
The women's space.
Yeah, the women's space. And as a young new Christian in my late 20s, I remember thinking, man, that is the kind of ministry that I would love to be involved in. And I actually thought in my training that's where I would end up, quite a diaconate kind of a role. Can you share about that? Because it's just, you've got so many incredible stories about St. Peter's Lane.
Well, look, it was an amazing time. I mean, I was in my early 20s back then, and I was very young and idealistic, and I guess first thing was that to me, Sunday mornings, church started with sitting on the red tiled steps with Danny, who was waiting for the Frisco Hotel to open, and just being present with him and connecting with him as a fellow human being together. That was a beautiful way to start, church for me. And then church went on to going just down the road to the Woolloomooloo Square, and we'd have this guy, Eric, who used to play the guitar and sing all these boisterous Christian songs and folk songs, and there'd be all these people many of them who'd been sleeping on the streets the night before, come together, about 60 people around the square, and there'd be people giving out soup and bread and coffees, and it was a buzzing sort of place, and it wasn't this kind of patronising, we're here to give you this stuff. It was sort of a little... It was a breakfast. It was a coming
community
together, and then we go to the official church. But I felt that was as much kind of breaking bread. That was as much kind of the Lord's Supper, the communion, as when we went into church and we reflected on those faith issues in the church service, in the liturgy, in that service. So that was that's how Sundays was. And then there was a lot going on. It was in a lot of ways like, I have great admiration for Wayside Chapel, and I love particularly the emphasis in the Wayside Chapel of presence.
Yes.
That's something I've learned from their work, and I think resonates with how I also approach it. It's about welcoming people and being present with people is the greatest gift you can give. And we actually worked with the Anglican Church there too, who set up a little cafe called PJ's, and it was in the basement of the then St. Peter's Church, and it was actually a welcoming space, particularly for transvestite, transsexual sex workers who used to operate as, I think it was out of St. Peter's Lane. And it was a space for them to know that they were safe. And so, for example, they used to have meetings and they organised this thing called the Ugly Mugs list, and that was people they knew they had to keep an eye out for because they'd bashed them.
Wow.
For example. And
Wow.
but it was a place just where people came together and had coffee, and it was and shared life together, and it was a place of warmth in the cold. And an incredible ministry, probably back in a time with these issues weren't as discussed, weren't as mainstream as much perhaps as they are today.
It's very encouraging to hear that the Baptists were a part of that then, you know.
Yeah, the Baptists, they've done some all right things.
Yeah, very much so.
They're cool
Yeah.
in some ways.
They are. Yep.
Well,
Powerful urban mission, that is.
It
Most
is. It was very
definitely,
powerful.
isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. I know some people would hear something like that and go, wow, that's great, but are we sharing the gospel with these people? Like, why else would you want to fraternize with sex workers or you name it? And that's certainly not a position that I hold, but I can hear the people, like some of those opinions. How, for you at that time, and maybe as you've reflected as the years have gone by since that time in that ministry, how did you approach like the gospel's place in ministering to these people? Like, and you already kind of spoken about how that was as much church as it was going into the church building after that. But how did you approach? Well, I guess how did your discipleship play into how you approached being in those spaces? And I don't know, how's this resonating for you? Like, it's a question that I know a lot of people are interested in. For me, it's really simple because you look at the Gospels and those are the people that Jesus spent the most time with. But I wonder how you answer that. Yeah,
it's a good question. I think, I always see it as the Matthew 25, but when you were.
Yep.
It's like there is Christ in
The
those
least of
people.
these.
So I think that's the first thing is that
Yeah.
that you see Christ in them, and I think that when you genuinely do that to people, then they see that this is. I think that's when they start to see Christ in you, because it's kind of like they're not seeing judgment; they're seeing a person who's just connecting with them as they are. And a lot of people, who end up, as sex workers, obviously in that sort of a situation, or people on the streets, there's stories of damage often in people's lives underneath that means they've got a lot of layers of protection. And so, the first thing that shares the gospel is just, we value you as human, and in the end, it's about inviting people to consider other pathways but letting them decide on that. And look, there were examples of where we saw people, who I even remember a guy who, came from overseas. He got caught up in a very destructive process. He was an alcoholic. He just kind of got in. He got stuck here, and on the streets, and he ended up just becoming part of the community. I think and as he ended up getting baptised, because we're Baptists, so we back then. So, and he got baptised, and he actually went back to the UK. He changed, but we didn't actively try and recruit him with sort of some gospel message. All of a sudden, it was just a doing life with people, and him making his decisions, and us asking questions and answering them. And some people, that happened. Other people got sort of halfway. They were just part of a community with it. Other people just knew you were present with them in their world with all its wonder and its weirdness and its destruction or whatever. But you kind of, to me, it's about not even judging. When we talk about someone even coming to be a Christian, we're like, so, well, where is it on that line that happens, and who am I to say, in one sense? I mean, I think our role is just to be present and take opportunities to share as they come. But it's always, how do we do it in a way that people are really hearing what we're saying?
And it's authentic. I think
Yep.
there's nothing worse than shoving Jesus down someone's throat in an unauthentic way.
Yep.
We're much better by just, I think we can be seen as Jesus would want us to be seen, by being the hands and feet of him in the doing and the loving
Yeah.
of the least of these. And in doing that, we are being Christ, aren't we?
Absolutely.
I reflect on like my own experiences being with a lot of non-Christian friends, for example, going through high school, that many of whom I'm still really close with today. In my perhaps more naive teen years, at times I thought it was my job to really explicitly tell people the gospel. And I look back in a lot of the ways I used to try and do that just weren't, at the very least, like they just weren't effective, let alone useful or in any way actually going to have take root in any way.
No.
But a lot of those friends who I'm still friends with now are more, it's not that they're more receptive, but it's because we actually have a genuine connection.
Yes.
And they haven't just heard the words of the gospel, but they've seen what the gospel has done to me.
Yep.
Because we
Yes.
actually share a connection. That is where that can then start to take root, not because I've told them, but because they've actually seen the effect of it. And so in situations like the one that you're describing there, in that context, it's so not useful to just come in and talk to, I don't know, someone that's living on the street and go, you know what you need? You need Jesus, brother. Like, in what
Have you read Luke's gospel?
in what universe is that going to be useful?
Yeah.
Where it is useful would be my suspicion is just to, like you say, be present and share space together and over time see what change that actually brings about in someone's life. And you can't see that unless there's actually a genuine connection and a genuine desire to spend time together.
And generously provide. I think we're called to be, to provide that provision of shelter, of water, of food, of clothing, of help with mental health, financial, all the bits that whoever you're meeting, wherever you're meeting them, meet that need. Be that person that helps meet the need for that person that cannot meet the need for themselves. I think that's definitely being Jesus in action and love in action.
Yeah.
For
and
this we will
absolutely.
be known.
Yep. Very.
Do you
yeah.
think?
I
Do you think that
agree.
passed the Jesus test?
And it's also being open to sometimes it's surprising how you can learn from the stories that
Oh, yeah,
community,
stories.
it's a two-way street, because as you share life with people, they give you interesting perspectives and challenge your own story as well. So it's not one way, I think. But I do think, yes, you're right. There is, I can relate to what you're saying, Jonty, because I was, when I was young too, I was burdened when I was at school with this idea that I had to share this news with everyone, which was, something I'm glad my children didn't get passed on.
Just young
It's not a
zealots,
helpful
you two.
burden. Definitely not very cool when you're at school.
Very
Yeah.
uncool, boys. But I do have to tell you though, my friends at 25 were Bible bashing me like you were bashing your mates and your friends. And ultimately, as much as it pissed me off at the time and it irritated me to my core, it moved me to a point where I finally went to church, and then I had a cataclysmic event, an interaction with the Holy Spirit, and my life was changed forever. So I don't know. I think maybe the shoving it down people's throat in small doses, maybe it chips away. Well, it certainly worked for me, and I didn't. I would have. I repelled it at the time.
Yeah.
But I this is where I am now.
But I think a lot of it also is very similar to missional work. It's so specific to the context.
Yes.
It's so specific to the context. And the gospel will take root in a way specific to where it's taking root. So I think also there's, like we were talking about the savior complex thing earlier with mission, I think there's also an element of that in like sharing the gospel with people. I think we can sometimes, I don't know, certainly, and again, reflecting on what I was like as a young teenager, particularly like 13, 14, 15, we kind of can sometimes assume that the gospel needs me to share it. Like the gospel's going to move regardless. And I don't know, there's a bit of ego that sometimes goes with it. Like my friends need me to share it with them. Like I'm the one. And I wonder if that can sometimes be a little bit unhelpful sometimes.
Probably.
Yeah. But again, contextual.
Yeah,
it's
it is.
specific to
Just,
But I think it is one. I mean, I think there is a place too to sort of invite people to say, you
100%.
can be part of this journey if they want. But it's about respecting their.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a path to this way of being present and knowing goodness in the world, which we call God and love and. Yes, you can. I think the danger is becoming too shy, where you don't ever
say nothing at all.
want to ever share any of it. So it's got it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
But when you're 13, 14, you think you know everything.
I just want to say to your 13 and 14-year-old young boys, I just want to say kudos to you, clicks to you. I love the fact that you were doing that. I would have, if I'd had a son, I would have loved my sons to do that thing. You know, I just think that's wonderful. And go your parents. Amazing. I think that's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. God, I feel like the angels are doing claps from heaven. But can I circle us back to Uniting World? Is that okay?
That would be great.
Yeah, I just, all of it's a great conversation. I'm wondering if we were to do a shout out to our listeners right now, Barry, other than prayer, praying for the mission in all the different parts of the world that Uniting World impacts, what can we do and how can we help?
Yeah, I think the first thing is everyone should go and look at the Uniting World website because there's some amazing stuff on there. If you look on our Vimeo site, there's some incredible videos that will help you begin to understand the stories of people, So I think that's one thing that you could do. And you'd start to connect like I did. Like I was very ignorant of a lot of what's going on in the Pacific and the fact that our Pacific brothers and sisters, in many cases are facing literal existential crisis where they're going to lose many of their countries. And sometimes I think we're not even aware of what's going on in the lives of our sisters and brothers. So I think that there's so many great stories that you could learn from. And I think sometimes when you begin to connect to some of those stories and you see the innovative ways that our partners are seeking to do things, it might open you to then look at how you might be able to give something, And there's plenty of I've given one example with the work we talked about in Zimbabwe, that there's so many other exciting programs, from climate adaptation strategies in the Pacific, gender violence programs that are helping with issues related to violence against women, inclusion programs for people that have disabilities. I mean, there's just so many amazing projects, to be honest, that partners are involved in. So I think it's start to get to know it. I mean, I would love to be able to come, if there's any ministers here, come and ask me to come and share at your church. I'm keen to come and just share this story, because this is not my organisation. This is I know we're not all Uniting Church Listeners podcast, but just for those who are, this is part of the amazing story of the Uniting Church, Uniting World. And it's part of our ongoing participation in mission. So why not hear how the amazing stories of how the ongoing mission of Uniting Church is impacting the world, because it's a pretty exciting story to be part of. And just to connect us to our, to become a global neighbour, to just connect us. It's a wonderful way to connect to our world in a fresh way, and to renew our mission as church, because our mission as church is obviously includes our neighbourhood, but this is the thing, the call of Jesus is a big one. It's the kind of call to love neighbour as self, and the whole world is our neighbour. I know we can't do everything, but that's the challenge is to expand our horizons, and I think Uniting World is a wonderful way for enliven that mission in the church. And I would also just love to hear one of the great privileges of doing the job I'm doing is it's actually hearing the stories of the mission that churches in the Uniting Churches are
a part of.
Here. I mean, just hearing about what you're doing here, it's wonderful, the work that's being done in this community. And that's a privilege too. It's kind of about learning about that and sharing together. So anyway, invite me to come along.
Yeah. So I'm going to do a sneaky shout out down the barrel of the camera. Are you ready?
Yep.
Friends, reverend brothers and sisters, church communities that are listening to Filthy Hope today, why don't you give Barry Higgins a call at Uniting World and invite him to your church? He will preach and teach on the missional work that Uniting World is doing in and around the world. It will be a wonderful Sunday. Make it a mission Sunday. Invite your community to be involved and take hold of that. I'm so excited about that.
Look at you go. You didn't even have a teleprompter.
And you get a day off speaking.
Yeah.
A day off speaking?
That's why you've got him in.
He's coming on Sunday. I'm so
you get
excited.
to chill out. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wonderful, and our communities need to know more about it, because I think at Wallara and our church, Uniting Heart and Soul, we have been involved in lots of missional work in Africa, not Uniting World stuff, but other great mission, and also a part of the Fiji Eye Project, which we've been heavily a part of writing checks for and supporting in prayer and in finances. And that's the beautiful thing about our church is they have been big givers, big supporters of mission overseas. When their church was quite small, they didn't have the manpower to do the missional work here on the ground, but they were financially supporting lots of churches and lots of missions overseas. So, and there's plenty of churches that can still do that, and it's exciting. All denominations. This isn't just a shout out, not just a shout out to the Uniting Church, any other denominations out there that want to get involved. Uniting World. Give Barry a call.
Absolutely.
Now.
Again, no teleprompter.
Can I ask you, what are you grateful for?
Generally?
Yeah.
Well, let's go. What are you grateful for today?
Yeah, thank you.
I think that
Thanks.
just to narrow it down.
Grateful for today?
Yes.
I'm just grateful for, to be honest with you, just being here, and I'm just loving connecting with both of you and hearing a bit about your stories, because I think it's just the opportunity to really listen to other people and suddenly realise there's so many amazing things being done. We're in a world right now where there's so much shit bombarding us.
Yes. I'm so glad you're an ex-Baptist and you said shit. Barry just said shit, friends. And I'm loving that.
But I mean, it's like we allow ourselves to the narrative to control us, to be, all the things we can't influence. The wars that are going on in the world, and the whole Trump thing, and there's so much to be anxious about. Yet if we just could, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be listening to that story, it's an important thing to keep connected to, right? But the danger is it ends up absorbing us. And then there's this, hang on, what are you grateful for? It's a great question, because it's like, well, hold on, there's all these glimmers of hope. There's amazing things that people are doing. Yes. I mean, what you're doing, and it's kind of getting a sense of, there's some fantastic stuff out there. Let's listen to that. And wouldn't it be great if we started to have more news about that? Like, look at this amazing thing that's going on in Zimbabwe that's changing lives. Hey, there's something you can do. Here's another. There's so many things that we as human beings are doing that are so hopeful, but at the moment, it's almost like all we're seeing is this ugliness, and it's not all of us. We do some. We are, there's some beautiful, wonderful things, and I sometimes. I'm grateful for trying to keep connected to that, because sometimes the other stuff just kind of can eat up your hope if you're not careful.
100%.
Yeah. That's a great
beautiful.
answer. Yeah. If people want to get in touch with you to carry on this conversation or get in touch about anything Uniting World related, what's the best way people can do that?
Well, the best thing is you can just get me at there's what's my number? Barry H at unitingworld.org. Or, look, you could just get contacts through Uniting World with me. I would, I'm up for conversations. Anyone who's interested in looking at how we can build more hope in our world and believing in possibilities out there. Let's have some conversations. So I'd love to get in touch with people. I'm not sure if that's probably the best way.
And we'll put the details below anyway, Barry.
Yeah, we can put the details. That would be really good if we could do that.
So
Yep.
just follow the links down below if you want to follow up on anything that we've talked about. But particularly, we'll put some links to ways you can learn more about some of the missional stuff that Uniting World are doing and how you can get involved with that as well. So we'll have all of that information down below. Thanks so much for being here. We've
Pleasure.
absolutely loved chatting to you, and we'll anytime you're around, we'll do this again, because I know, just having me for the first time today, that there's so much more to your story that we could
100%.
dive into.
And we've got some resonation. I want to talk about the whole school and we got a story there.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you.
Such
really
an
appreciate
uplifting conversation. I'm just so happy to have been a part of it. I'm so glad I found you. I found him. Or did you find me?
it. I found you. You
How
found
did you
me.
find
Look,
me?
it's-
We found each other.
I was recommended.
Who? Was it Glenn?
Glenn Spencer. I think.
Glenn
Yeah.
Spencer.
So Glenn, a shout out to
Cheeky
you.
Glenn Spencer.
Open door policy to you, Glenn, as well, because I know you listen. So whenever you want to come in and do a podcast, you're welcome as well.
Yeah, Glenn Spencer, we've been inviting you for a while. Ring us at Uniting Heart and Soul. Give us a call, Glenn Spencer. Get on the couch.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Welcome back. That was our interview with Barry Higgins from Uniting World. I think, just to underline that, if you're interested in following up anything, email us, filthyhopepod@gmail.com, and we can get you in touch with who you need to get in touch with. But all the links and details are down below as well. Such a good conversation.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, terrific guy.
Yeah, phenomenal. And we'll definitely, I think, try and do another one with him at some point as well, because he was so easy to talk to.
I've had an idea, Jonty.
Hit me with it.
Presbyteries in the Uniting Church. How about this? Let's see if we can gather together in hubs to raise 25K and push that out to Uniting World so they can build wells. I think that's a really doable thing. Why don't we get on board and do that? Let's make it a competition, a Holy Spirit-driven competition. You're on. You ready? Ready, set, go!
So if you want to take part in that, or just take part in anything that Uniting World are doing, links down below. All the information you need is down there. If Barry hasn't sold you on it, and to be honest, if that hasn't sold you on it, I don't know what will. Thanks, Ness.
Do we need steak knives? Honestly, Jonty, do we need steak knives?
What are we doing next week? I can't even remember, because who knows when this one's coming out. It's in the future sometime. We're recording this in the middle of June, so I think it's probably August by the time this one comes out. If you want to continue the conversation, join us in our Facebook community group, which is where you can interact with us and also a bunch of other listeners of the show. We might even invite Barry into that group. So if you want to chat to him about this, you can do that there. Or, as always, you can email us at filthyhopepod@gmail.com. How can people support us, Ness, if they want to support the show?
Yeah, they can buy our merch, hats, bougie T-shirts, amazing. And we've got an online store. If you go to the online store, you don't actually have to pay the freight. Oh, shit, yes, you do.
If you want to get...
Yeah, if you want them cheaper, you've got to come to our
Come to a
Filthy
live
Hope,
show.
a live show.
What a great segue, Ness.
Yeah, that was a good
come
one.
Come to a live show.
Come to a live show, Jonty, and you can get them cheaper there.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but you can support us in prayer. Boy, we need some prayer. That'd be amazing.
Yep.
And if you know somebody that would be a great guest on this show that has a great story, reach out to us. We'd be really curious to entertain that thought.
Absolutely, yeah. I had another thing that I had to say. Oh, yeah, if you're listening to this or any other episode of this show and you're getting value out of it and you're thinking, man, this other person in my life would probably really like this show, share it with them. Word of mouth is like the biggest way that this show grows. So if you have someone, a parent, a friend, a cousin, whoever, someone you work with that you think would really love this show, share it with them. It's such a great way to support us and continue to grow the show. You can also leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That always helps. If you write up a little review on there, just some kind words, we'll read it out in the show, give you a shout out. If you don't like the show, don't leave a review, because Fair play to you.
But you can say nasty things into the feedback because that helps our algorithm also.
Oh, yeah, leave a comment. We love those.
We love them.
Unless you're being transphobic, in which case I will just delete your comment as I had to do the other week.
Delete it. Gone.
Yeah. If you want to continue listening to us throughout the rest of the week, we've got Into the Word coming out on Wednesdays. By the time this comes out, I reckon we will have finished our season on Acts. And if you're listening over there, you'll know what we're doing next as well, because by the time this comes out, we will have decided that already. At the time of recording, we haven't quite decided yet because we're still recording the Acts episodes. If you don't know what Into the Word is, we are on Wednesdays on this podcast feed, but a separate podcast, going through little bite-sized chunks of Bible. It's 10 or 15 minutes of just looking at a Bible passage and unpacking it. So if you're interested in that, come join us there. Our children's ministry project-y stuff is continuing to bubble along.
Oh, that's exciting.
Again, just to call out to if you are in kids ministry in any way, if you're a kids worker, if you lead youth groups, if you're a minister and you're heading up a kids ministry, or even if you're a parent and you're interested in kids ministry, get in touch with us because we've got a couple of things brewing, one of which is in production already, and we want to share that with you and get good feedback so it actually is going to hit the people that we want it to hit in the best way possible.
Amazing.
So
if you'd like a copy of our 2 pilots, let us know and we can forward you the links.
Yep, we'd love your feedback. I think that's it.
That's it.
Let's get out of here.
It's a wrap, brother.
See you guys next week. See you then.
See you, babe. Bye.
This is a prayer for the people who want to give up, who have been hurt beyond repair and cannot bear to see your face in anything. Find peace in letting go of the guilt that isn't yours, and find hope in understanding. Life is not a game you have to win. Forgiveness overwhelming, salvation